What's the hardest piece of data that you've been chasing, that you've chased in your life? Like, what are some interesting things? Because you mentioned like one of the things you kind of want to go somewhere in the world and find evidence and data for things that people just haven't really looked to gain an understanding of human nature, maybe from an economics perspective. What kind of stuff either in your past or in your future you've been thinking about?
Well, I mean, there's hard in two senses. The hardest emotionally was interviewing all those kids in northern Uganda. That was just like a gut punch every day. Um, and just hearing the stories, like that was the hardest, but it wasn't hard because the kids were everywhere and everybody would talk to you about it and they could talk about it. You could. No one had gone and interviewed kids that had gone through war in the middle of an active war zone. Nobody was going to displacement. All the things we did, no one had done that before. So now lots of people do it.
Could you actually speak to their stories? What's like the shape of their suffering? What what were common themes? How did those stories change you?
I remember I said you have like your dispassionate self and your passionate self. I think I had to learn to create the dispassionate self. I mean, we all have that capacity when we analyze something that's far away and happens to people different than us, but you have to. I think I discovered and developed an ability to like put those aside in order to be able to study this. So you get maybe harder in a way that you have to be guard against. So you have to try to remember to put your human head on. It's really horrible. Like if I want to conscript you and I don't want you to run away, then I want to make you think you can never go back to your village. And the best way for me to do that is to force you to do something really, 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 really horrible that you almost can credibly believe you could never really go back. And it might be like killing a loved one. And just hearing people tell you that story in all of the different shapes and forms to a point, what was horrible about it is they did this so routinely that you'd be sitting there in an interview with somebody and they'd be telling you the story, and it's like the most horrible thing that could happen to you or anyone else. But there's some voice in the back of your mind saying, okay, we really need to get to the other thing. We know that I know how this goes. Like I've heard, there's this thing like, okay, I'm not learning anything new here. Like there's some part, deep, evil, terrible part of you that's like, yeah. Like, but let's get on to the other thing. But I know I have to go through this. But every day you have to go through that to get to because you're trying to actually understand how to help people. You're trying to understand how that trauma has manifested, some people get stronger as a result of that. Some people get weaker. And if you want to know how to help people, then you need to get to that. I wasn't trying to get to something for my selfish purposes, really. I was trying to figure out, okay, we need to know what your symptoms are now.
That's such a dark thing about us. So if you're surrounded by trauma, God, that voice in the back of your head that you just go, yeah, I know exactly how this conversation goes. Let's skip ahead to the solutions, to the next.
Yeah.
And then,
So that was because you then have to deal with yourself. So it's very helpful if you like come home every night to someone who's A, gone through the same thing, and B, is a professional and very, 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 very good counseling psychologist. The hardest thing, I mean, the organized crime stuff has been the hardest. Just figuring out how to get that information. It took us years of just trial and error, mostly error, of like just how to get people to talk to us or how to collect data in a way that's safe for me and safe for my team and safe for people to answer a survey. Like, how do you get the information on what gangs are doing in the community or how it's hurting or helping people? Like, you've got to run surveys and you've got to talk to gang members, all these things, and that nobody knows how to do that.
Yeah.
And so we had to sort of really slowly, not nobody, there's a few other, I think there's other academics like me who are doing this, but it's a pretty small group that's trying to like collect systematic data. And then there's a slightly bigger and much more experienced group that's been talking to different armed groups. But every time you go to a new city, and there weren't that many people working on this in Medellin, there were a few, you have to like discover anew. Like it's really unique to that city and place.
So there's not like a website for each of the 17 mafia groups. There's no Facebook group.
Well, there is now. We've created like our own wiki. We have a private wiki.
Nice.
where we document everything, and it's a collaborative enterprise between lots of researchers and journalists and things. So they now have, they can't see, you can't go online and see this
But
unless
that's individual researchers, so it's not. I mean, they're
yeah.
hiding by design.
Some of them have Facebook pages and things of this nature. So they do have public profiles a little bit, but not so explicitly. No, so they're clandestine. Here's an example. So one of the things that's really endemic in Medellin, it's true in a lot of cities, it's true in American prisons, is gangs govern everybody's everyday life. So if you have in an American prison, particularly Illinois or California or Texas is another big one, but also in a city in Medellin, if you have a problem, a debt to collect or dispute with a neighbor or something, you could go to the government, and they do, and they can help you solve it. Or you can go to the police, or you can go to the gang.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like a really everyday phenomenon. But then there's a question of like, how do you actually figure out what services they're offering and how much they pay for them, and do you actually like those services, and how do you comparison shop between the police and the gang, and what would get you to go from the gang to the police, and then how's the gang strategically going to respond to that? And what was the impact of previous policies to like make state governing better? And how did the gangs react? And so we had to sort of figure that out. And that was just hard in a different way. But I don't do the emotionally punishing stuff I couldn't do any longer. So that's much easier in that sense.
By the way, on Jorge Ochoa, some of these folks are out of prison.
Yeah.
Have you gotten a chance to talk to him by any chance?
One of my collaborators on this, a guy named Gustavo Duncan, who spent a lot of time interviewing paramilitaries, has written a book. He's talked to more of these people than I have. I haven't talked to those, and we haven't been talking to them about this stuff. But also, they were there in a different era.
Yeah, so it doesn't.
The system was totally different. That's super interesting. Maybe one day we'll do that.
Almost
We're
like
trying
history.
to understand. Yeah, that was 30 years ago.
Yeah,
and the system of, La Oficina, Pablo Escobar created La Oficina. He integrated all these 17 razones and all these street gangs are the fragmented former remnants of his more unified empire, which he gave the name La Oficina. I think, it's a little bit apocryphal, but the idea is, I think he said, every doctor has an office, so should we.
I still can't imagine. I still love that there's parallels between these mafia groups and the United Nations Security Council. This is just wonderful. It's so deeply human.